Hi everybody, I'm going to walk you through some of the basic information you need to complete your Phase 1 for the unit plan. So you'll be opening up several documents in Blackboard, and if you're in Blackboard and you're looking at the final project check-in, you'll need this first document, and then I'm going to go ahead and attach the KTIP form to this, so you should see two documents when you're looking at your information. So when you open up the final phase directions, you're going to see some basic information at the top. And note that you are responsible for the work that's highlighted in yellow below. This is Phase 1. You're going to be completing 3 phases altogether. This first phase, you're going to do some organization that will help you through all 3 phases. So you'll need to take the KTIP lesson plan template, and you're going to need to save it 5 times. And for each one, you're going to save it with a slightly different name. So it's going to be your last name, an underscore, and then SED 402 unit plan, another underscore, and then lesson, and then you're going to number it. So if I was saving my first lesson, I would save it as Clark underscore SED 402 unit plan underscore lesson 1, and then I would save it again for lesson 2, 3, 4, and 5. Every time you upload the assignment, you're going to upload it 5 times for all 5 lessons. And note that this Phase 1 is the big picture that helps us understand the assignment. So just as a reminder of the assignment overview, we're doing 5 unique lessons, and they are focusing on differentiated strategies and UDL. So all the things we've been doing all along in class. And we're also going to be focusing on the different learning needs of students with sensory, physical, learning, cognitive, and behavior differences. So to be able to do that, you're going to need to use the documents that we have been using in class, those first few classes, the lesson plan handbook, and also the IDEA definitions. I'll go ahead and post some additional information that kind of breaks down these areas for you to give you a little bit more information. When we're looking at your teaching framework, keep in mind that we're looking at UDL, and as we talked about in class, that's those multiple options and variety in how I teach, how the students interact, those practice opportunities, and how they're assessed. In this first phase, we're strictly focusing on the overview, the learning targets, and the big picture. So you won't be getting down into student activities and assessment until the next phases, but that's good to have those ideas in mind. Remember that UDL doesn't focus on one student's specific needs, but rather holistically looks at how we can teach to meet the learning needs of every student in our classroom. The grading is going to really focus on how those lessons are differentiated, and if you're meeting those really diverse sensory, physical, learning, cognitive, and behavior needs. And know that you're going to need assessments for each of your lessons. You'll need at least 4 formative assessments and 1 summative assessment, and you'll need to attach those assessments to your lessons. We're going to be using the new KTIP lesson plan format, which I will have for you in Blackboard. And know that your lessons must be uniquely created by you, but as a new teacher and even an experienced teacher, we expect you to use professional resources. So for sure, you should be citing KDE and the Common Core, and you should be citing content, websites, and texts that tell me that you know that the content that you're teaching is accurate. So you can't say, I already knew about addition, so that's what I'm teaching. You would need to say, I'm using as a foundation Khan Academy, or I'm using as a foundation Everyday Math. But you need to have some foundational content listed as a reference. So for the first 5 lessons, the only 5 you're doing, you're going to have the intro information that includes your overall classroom management plan and how you will be differentiating content for those specific differences that we talked about earlier. You're going to include your learning target, which will include the Kentucky Common Core. They have to be written as I can statements, and you're going to do that for all 5 lessons. So what does that look like in the new KTIP lesson plan? Well, here's the new KTIP lesson plan, and I've gone ahead and annotated that for you. You'll save this 5 times. So for lesson 1, I'm going to put my name here in the name section. For the date of observation, I want you to put a number 1 because this is 1 unit. And for cycle, if this is my first lesson, I'm going to put cycle 1. If it's my second lesson, I'm going to put cycle 2. Then you're going to give me the ages and grades of the students. You're going to follow through all the information that's required. When you're doing the age and grade, know that you're going to include the total number of students in a gen ed classroom, so however many students you think would be on average in your 3rd grade classroom or in your 10th grade geometry classroom. And you're going to be specific about students with disabilities. This is your choice, but I'm giving you some parameters. So you need to have at least 3 students with disabilities listed, and your choices for disability categories are the categories listed here. So it could be autism, specific learning disabilities. If you choose specific learning disability, you need to be specific. Is that reading fluency, reading comp, writing, math comp, or math reasoning? It could be intellectual disability, EBD, or other health impairment for ADHD. So you're going to list 3 specific students that you would plan on having, and then your lesson title, whatever you're titling this lesson. You're going to complete the context section. So this is going to include some specific background that describes your students and their identified disabilities. So we're going to think both about learning strengths and about learning needs. And each lesson has to have at least one evidence-based practice that's in that Kentucky Lesson Plan Handbook. So we're looking at explicit instruction, scaffolded instruction, all the things that are in that first part of the book. You need to address the following categories, because we know that when we're planning a UDL lesson, if we plan for these categories, we're going to meet the learning needs of every student. So when we think about sensory differences for students, we're thinking about things that might inhibit their ability to interact with the content. So this could be a student with ADHD who has sensitivity to noise, like the buzzing in the classroom, might have a sensitivity to lights, easily distracted. This could also be a student with autism who is distracted by sensory things like the way the fabric on his shirt touches him, and so he's distracted from his learning. So when you think about sensory, think about anything that could be lights, noises, it could be touch, it could be the texture of the materials you're asking a student to deal with, anything that might affect your sensory system. When we think of physical differences, we think of the layout of the room and if it's accessible. So if I have a student who uses a wheelchair and the wheelchair is 24 inches wide and my classroom is set up with desks that are 18 inches wide, then my room is not accessible. So think about the layout of your classroom and how you're going to make that accessible, including are the tables and chairs at accessible height? Can the student access computers or learning materials? Anything you're going to have other students do, are those things that you're asking them to do accessible to all students? When we think about learning differences, we're going to think about our content, and this is strictly looking at accommodations. We'll talk about modifications next, but this might be that the reading materials need to be modified to a higher or lower reading level. This could be the amount of text that's on a page. This could be the need for a scribe if a student has a specific learning disability in writing. This could be the need for a graphic organizer or a calculator. So any supports that a student with a specific learning disability might need, or a calculator. So how am I modifying the content to meet the needs of students with learning differences? Cognitive differences are students with intellectual disabilities. And here we're thinking about the need for modifications or changes to the content. So instead of a 20-page reading, this will be summarized into 5 main points with pictures. Or doing part of a math equation. So this is significantly changing the content for a student with an intellectual disability. This could also be students that are diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, or students with autism. Depending on the disability itself and how that impacts the student's ability to cognitively interact with materials. Students with behaviors, remember we talked about both those internalizing or acting or depression behaviors that are exhibited within a child versus externalizing behaviors, which are acting out behaviors. how can I support students' needs in this area? So what can I do? And remember, we talked about behavioral supports like behavior contracts, rewards and consequences. So we want to think about appropriate ways we can interact with students. And you can find all kinds of supports for all of these areas in that lesson plan handbook. But what you need to think about holistically are, here are some basic sensory, physical, learning, cognitive, and behavior differences that my students might exhibit. Now the next question that's going to come up is, I'm just choosing 3 students with specific learning disabilities in reading. Do I have to cover these other areas? And my answer is yes, you do, because a teacher that understands her classroom or his classroom and all the possible supports a student might need is the teacher that is well prepared to teach all students in her classroom. Further down in the unit, once we actually start getting down into the lesson details, you're going to include specially designed instruction and supplementary aids and services. And those you're going to include in all caps so that they're easy to see. After you kind of give us a holistic look at the things you're doing to support students with different learning styles and needs, then you're going to tell me your overall classroom procedures and what strategies you're going to use. So start out with, I'm going to be providing content, I'm going to have some centers, and here are the expectations that I have for those areas. So start with your overall classroom procedures, and this could be your CHAMPS procedures, whatever you're using to manage your classroom. The expectations that you have or rules for your class. And then you're going to look at differentiated strategies. So you might have added in, I will provide a behavior contract and use Class Dojo. So you want to specifically lay that out. And then this next part, if you are doing different activities, which you should, in your lesson, as you are expected, lay out different procedures for these areas. So if whole group, my first instruction for the first 15 minutes is a YouTube video, then that's whole group. So those expectations are clear. But then if I'm having 4 centers, then this would be different expectations. So you're going to want to lay those out. And if you don't know, as you're starting this first part, I'm not exactly sure that I'm going to have centers yet, then you're going to lay out your basic classroom expectations. And then as you develop into phase 2 and phase 3, if your expectations change, then you're going to need to change this information. Don't forget to add your learning target. This is the last part of what you're doing for phase 1. You're going to add your learning targets, which are I can statements. And then underneath my I can statements, I'm going to put the KDE standards. And you're going to address that current learning target. And, sorry, I'm saying this in the wrong order. I'm going to copy this for you. So first of all, you have the prior lessons, I can statements. This is your current lessons, I can statements, and then what's coming in the next lesson. And again, you're making your best assumption for the first phase, and then if you change your mind or change details in the second and third phase, make sure you change this information. After you submit this on time in Blackboard, I will give you specific and detailed feedback, and then you'll be required to make changes on your first submission before you submit your second phase. So be sure to hang on to this in a place where you can access the file again. If you have any questions, please ask them to the questions board. I'm happy to answer, and I hope you have a great time thinking and planning and showing me what a fantastic teacher you are.